So now it's time to create the step 2 page. Let's remove what we have here at the moment. Just leave the opening PHP tag and type in require once, obviously a header which we need, so it's going to be underscore tmp header.php, and we also need the footer. So we close this PHP tag, few new lines, opening PHP tag and closing one at the end. Obviously we replace the header with the footer now. That's fine. So we have our header and footer. Now let's put the h1 tag, interest rather. Okay, now the paragraph saying tell us about your interests. Okay, so that's all fine. Let's create this solid line. So div class dev, which is 14 pixels high container with brts, border top solid, and non-breakable space in between. Okay, if we go back to our page, now if we click next, you can see our new page is now ready for adding all the checkboxes and everything. Okay, before we move on to adding checkboxes, let's first put the piece of code here at the beginning. So if we're going to check if the session step 1 has been created. If it wasn't, let's redirect them back to the first page. So no one's gonna jump from without filling up the form on the first page directly to the second one, to the second step. If they will be automatically redirected to the previous page. So if isn't set, so the exclamation mark right at the beginning before is set, and we have, actually let's copy this function. Let's open step 1. Sorry, let's copy this session name. If isn't set session 1, session step and 1, then our function redirect, and we're going to redirect them to p equals submission form. Okay, so this is making sure that no one's jumping directly onto the second page without going to the first one for initially. Okay, now let's create our checkboxes, a list of our checkboxes with the interests. So we're going to start with the form, action, we leave blank, method will be post. In between the form tags, we create a table. I'm going to use Eclipse here, tables, and it's going to be a table insert to make it easier for myself. Actually, it comes with a form, so we can remove these tags which I've created earlier. Just move the entire thing a little bit to the left. It's fine. So we've got form and we've got a table with the cell padding, cell spacing 0, border 0, and class table insert tbl underscore insert. Then we can remove this table cell, and what we're going to do next, we'll echo one of the functions which we'll create in a minute. So let's open PHP tag, echo get interest, and this function will take one parameter, which will simply be the name, which will later be passed onto our post to session function, which is the name which will be assigned to each every single checkbox in this list. So interest, basically. Okay. Now on the new line, we will create two buttons. We'll create two buttons, so we can actually leave this, but let's wrap it within the th tags. It's going to be just one cell. Okay, and before that, let's create div class def to make a space between the checkboxes and the two buttons as well. So non-breakable space. and then we have first one, which will be button 1, so for button 1. Class will be SBM for submit, and BTN standard, and then SBM previous, and FL L for float left, and MR R10. Now, okay, I understand that obviously all this is very confusing. Basically, these are the classes which I've created inside of the style sheet here. You can obviously leave it and create your own classes, and obviously this is just for the styling purposes. It's nothing very important here at this stage. Then we have our input, submit with BTN1. Remember that the 4 has to refer to the ID of the specific button from the label. And then we're going to go through our name, which will be exactly the same. Just name BTN1. Then we have class SBM BTN standard, and the value will be previous. Let's just have a look at this in the browser just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Okay, I've messed something up, so something doesn't work right. Okay, of course it doesn't work because we haven't got this function. So if I just comment this function for now, refresh, yeah, the button seems to be working fine. It's displaying properly, and it's a submit button. So if we go back and now copy the entire thing, label and our input, paste it again, only this time we will remove the float left, FL_L, and our margin as well. And this is going to be a SBM next, the class assigned to this button, and we'll change the 4 to number 2, BTN2 for ID, and name the same. And SBM and BTN standard will stay here. Then value will be next. So we should have now 2 buttons. Okay, they're not floating really very well. Okay, if we put this float left as well onto this one, the label class FL L, refresh, now they both float into the left with the margin in between. Okay, so our buttons are ready. Obviously we need to create this getInterest function, so let's uncomment it, copy the name of this function, go to our functions.php, scroll down, and let's put it somewhere. We have fetch, we have getAge, getCountries. Okay, after the getCountries, let's put the function getInterest, and we will take one parameter, the name. Okay, let's give it some description. Populate all interest. Okay. We'll start with a SQL statement, which will be select all from interest, order by name. Okay, so that's now done. Now we create a variable called rows, and we use our fetchAll function to get an array of results, basically. So if we use our SQL, okay, now we'll check if isn't empty rows, so if records have been found. Now we'll create out variable, and we'll assign a UL with the class of, we need to escape double quotes here, UL check. Okay, close this UL and closing quotes and semicolon. Now we will do for each loop. We'll loop through our results. So for each rows as row, Okay, and now we go out, we continue, we'll add in basically to this variable, so dot equal, we start with the li label for, and for will be our name plus the hash. As you can see, you may remember in the previous video we've been using this hash as a divider inside of the explode function. So hash, and after the hash we will add the ID of the record, so row ID. Okay, then we use the backslash to escape our quote, closing quote for the for attribute. Then we have class backslash quote, double quote, backslash double quote inside, and between we going to put the name of the class, which is radio. Okay, we close our label, closing double quote and semicolon. Now we add into our out variable. This time we add our input. Type equals, and obviously escaping double quotes, checkbox. Then we have our name, which will be the name inside of the closing, so inside of the curly braces. And sorry, I've actually done it wrong here. It should not, because obviously it's joining, so it's name, hash, and then ID. So obviously we have to remove this backslash here in between the name and the hash, plus this double quote. And the same here. So it's basically we can actually copy all this name and the curly braces, hash, and ID. Then after this we put ID, which will equal exactly the same thing. So let's copy this again. Okay, and then we have value, which will equal, so double quote, dot, and we have row and ID of the record, dot, double quote, then we have backslash to escape the double quote, and another double quote and semicolon. So we have input with the type, name, ID, and value. Now we add again to the out. This time we will use our sticky check function, and inside of this sticky check function we'll pass the name of the specific input, the name, ID of the specific input. So it will be our name with the ID basically. So if I copy this, and then we need to pass as well the ID of this specific record. So if it has been submitted, in order to store the checkbox, to keep the checkbox checks, we need to obviously pass the value of this specific record. So that should do the trick here. Then we have out, dot equal, and now we need to start with the double quotes, and we close in our input. We open in the span now, which will keep the name of the record. So after double quote, dot, row, and we getting name field, then dot, double quote, closing span, closing label, and closing li, and after the double quote, semicolon. Now we simply add closing ul tag, and after this we need to return this out variable. So return if it's set out, return out, otherwise return null. Okay, so our function should be working now. Let's go and check. So if we refresh the page, well, again we need to find the problem now. And I think I know what's causing the problem. We've used sticky check function here, but this function doesn't really exist yet. So if we comment this function and see if it's going to work without it, yes, there we go. We have all our records with the associated checkboxes displayed on our page. Now let's have a look at what the code looks like. I'm going to use the plugin for the Firefox called Firebug. And if we select one of these elements, you can see we have label with for attribute, which is interest, hash, and the ID of the specific record. And this is the same applies to ID and to the name. If we go to the next one, say this one here, exactly same situation, only this time obviously ID is 9, and everything works as expected. So what we're going to do next video will be we will use for creating the sticky checkbox function for us for a form to actually keep all these checkboxes checked once we submitted the form, moved back or forward, to make sure that all the values are selected as we have selected them.